Welcome to Outside Views. Today we continue our deep dive into what it would actually mean for the United Kingdom to apply for EU membership again. And this is not a rejoin. There is no automatic way back. There is only the accession process. And as we have discussed before, this process is the same for every country that applies. And today we will examine one of the many chapters a candidate must align with before it can even be considered for accession. The chapter we are discussing today is Trans-European Networks. This chapter is crucial because it governs infrastructure development across transport, telecommunications, and energy. It's about ensuring that all member states contribute to and benefit from a coordinated European infrastructure network. The UK, if it were to reapply for EU membership, would need to align itself fully with this chapter. And as with all other chapters, this is not a negotiation, even if the name is that. It's a process of compliance. There are no opt-outs. There are no special arrangements. There is only the requirement to meet EU standards in full. Trans-European networks, or TENs, are at the heart of EU infrastructure policy. These networks are designed to improve connectivity, boost economic integration, and facilitate the smooth movement of goods, services, energy, and data across the EU. The EU invests heavily in these networks, providing funding for major projects that link member states. These include high-speed rail connections, cross-border electricity grids, and fiber optic broadband networks. The goal is to create seamless, efficient, and sustainable infrastructure across Europe. If the UK were to apply for membership, it would need to reintegrate into these networks. And this means aligning its transport, energy, and digital policies with EU regulations. It also means contributing to EU-funded infrastructure projects and coordinating with EU institutions on future developments. Since Brexit, the UK has lost access to many EU funding mechanisms for infrastructure. Joining the EU again would restore access, but it would also mean that UK projects must meet EU requirements. And let's start with transport. The EU's transport network aims to connect member states through efficient and sustainable infrastructure. High-speed rail networks, road corridors, ports, and airports all fall under this category. The UK was once a key part of these networks. But since Brexit, it has been excluded from major EU transport investment programs. For example, the UK is no longer part of the Connecting Europe facility, which funds infrastructure projects that enhance connectivity across the EU. If the UK were to join again, it would need to reintegrate into the system. And that means meeting EU standards on railway interoperability, safety regulations, and environmental sustainability. It would also mean coordinating with EU partners on cross-border projects, such as high-speed rail links to France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And this is a significant challenge because Brexit has already led to regulatory divergence in transport policies. Reversing these changes and ensuring compliance with EU regulations would take time and investment. Energy is another crucial aspect of this chapter, although we already had a full energy chapter in another video. The EU's energy network aims to ensure a secure, sustainable, and integrated energy market across Europe. And this includes electricity interconnectors, gas pipelines, and renewable energy grids. Before Brexit, the UK was part of the EU's internal energy market, benefiting from cross-border energy trade and joint infrastructure projects. Since leaving, the UK has faced new challenges in energy cooperation. Joining the EU again would mean aligning fully with EU energy policies. And this includes adopting regulations on energy efficiency, market liberalization, and carbon reduction targets. The UK would also need to reconnect with the EU strategy on energy security, which involves reducing dependence on external suppliers and increasing the use of renewables. This is especially important given Europe's ongoing efforts to reduce reliance on fossil fuels and transition to a greener economy. Telecommunications is the third pillar of trans-European networks. The EU promotes the development of digital infrastructure, ensuring that all member states have access to high-speed broadband and 5G networks. The UK was previously involved in EU initiatives to expand digital connectivity and promote a single digital market. Since Brexit, it has lost access to some EU funding programs for digital infrastructure. Joining the EU again would mean committing to EU rules on data sharing, cybersecurity, and digital competition policies. And this includes aligning with EU regulations on internet governance and digital taxation. Another critical aspect is ensuring the interoperability of networks. The EU has strict requirements on cross-border digital services, ensuring that businesses and consumers can operate seamlessly across national borders. The UK would need to reintegrate into these frameworks to ensure compatibility with EU digital standards. Like all chapters of the acquis, trans-European networks must be fully implemented before accession is granted. And as I mentioned before, compliance does not stop after accession. Once a country becomes a member, it gets a vote in these decisions, but it must continuously align its policies with EU developments. And this means ongoing adjustments to regulations, continued participation in EU infrastructure projects, and maintaining an open and integrated network system. The UK would have to prove its long-term commitment to these policies before it could be considered for EU membership. It would need to demonstrate that its regulatory bodies are capable of implementing and enforcing EU standards. Failure to do so would delay or even block accession. And this brings us back to the broader picture of EU accession. Joining the EU again is not a simple return. It's an entirely new application process. And that process is governed by the Copenhagen criteria. The Copenhagen criteria set the fundamental requirements for any country seeking EU membership. A candidate country must demonstrate stable institutions, guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and protections for minorities. It must have a functioning market economy capable of handling the competitive pressures of the EU. And it must show the ability to adopt and enforce the full body of EU law, including trans-European networks. Many people think of negotiations as two sides bargainings over terms. But EU accession is not that. It's a process of compliance, and the EU does not lower its standards for new members. It is the applicant that must meet those standards. And the UK, if it were to apply, would not receive any special treatment. It would go through the same 35-chapter process as any other applicant. And Trans-European Networks is just one of these chapters. And now you already know how many videos on that there will be. Failure to comply means failure to progress in the accession process. And this is why the process is long and rigorous. And there are no shortcuts, only full compliance. Joining the EU again means fully adopting EU transport, energy and telecommunications policies, but also the restructuring of regulatory frameworks and committing to long-term alignment with EU objectives. And once again, there would be no opt-outs, no exceptions, no cherry-picking, only the process. The UK would need to show clear progress in these areas before even being considered for membership talks. It would need to prove its willingness to align its infrastructure development strategies with EU priorities. And this is not just about restoring lost connections. It's about committing to a shared European future. So thank you for watching Outside Views. And if you found this analysis useful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below the video what you think about this aspect of a potential UK application. See you in the next video, and one of those is right here in the end screen.